Go to Mr. Barrett now for 6 minutes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here today, sir. Who requested that Mr. Alexandre Trudeau sign the donation agreement for that $140,000 that was backed by Beijing?
I wasn't involved in that decision and wasn't aware of it at the time. I heard the testimony of both Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Rosenberg here last week explaining how that came about.
Do you know how many scholarships bear the name Pierre Elliott Trudeau across the country?
Well, of ours, 295 so far.
And those are scholarships with universities and
that's right.
Educational institutions?
Yeah, that's right, here and abroad.
Okay. Of those, and sorry, what was the number?
295 so far.
Of those 295 so far, with those agreements, how many did Mr. Alexandre Trudeau sign off on?
None to my knowledge.
Okay. The reason I ask is that, as you heard in Mr. Trudeau's testimony, the reason that he said he was required to sign the donation agreement, from these folks acting on behalf of the dictatorship in Beijing, was because it invoked his father's name. And he also said it was the only time in 20 years that he signed a donation agreement. So it's highly suspicious that we have this one occurrence with this one donation that was the subject of it's the subject of this meeting. You said that it didn't raise any red flags for you. You were on the audit committee at the time, so the process of having the donation receipt sent overseas, having officials from a foreign government in the meetings to agree on the donation agreement and the circumstances on the signing ceremony, that didn't raise any red flags for you?
I wasn't aware of it at the time, and this matter didn't come before the audit committee, to the best of my knowledge.
So no one ever asked if it was illegal?
I can't say that.
So did people ask at the time if this was illegal?
I'm unaware of
okay.
whether anyone did or did not. I'm
okay.
Sorry.
So CSIS recorded a conversation between the Beijing consulate and the donor. Are you aware of that now?
Is that the Globe and Mail report of February 28th?
Yes.
I've read the article.
So in that conversation, the donor was instructed by Beijing to make a donation to the Trudeau Foundation for the expressed purpose of gaining favor or access to the Prime Minister. You're aware of that from the article?
I'm aware of that allegation. It was to give $1 million, I believe, according to the newspaper report, to the foundation.
Okay. So knowing that now, having read that from those reports from CSIS in the Globe and Mail article, do you see the red flags for the donation?
Well, first,
with the benefit of hindsight,
in my opening remark, I mentioned that at no time was there $1 million offered to the foundation.
The foundation did receive $140,000.
That's correct. And a red flag. Well, when the president and I became aware of that article, we both agreed and subsequently worked with others in the foundation to repay the donation, the $140,000, on the basis of that allegation,
right?
Whether or not it was true, that it put us in a position that we felt we must repay this money.
Right. It obviously raised enough concern that CSIS's report was in fact correct, that you felt compelled to return the donation.
I can't say whether it was correct.
But you can say that it was compelling enough that you returned the donation.
The article in the newspaper was raised sufficient concern among us and among others involved in the foundation that we felt that was the appropriate course.
Right. It raised that concern with me too. Were you part of the committee that selected Pascal Fournier as the chief executive officer?
The search committee, I was not.
Okay. Does the Trudeau Foundation have bylaws that address foreign influence?
No. We have bylaws, but nothing, I don't recall anything specific in the bylaws that deals with foreign influence.
So we have a report from CSIS that says that the Trudeau Foundation was used as part of a foreign influence operation, and we have no mechanisms in place at the foundation to prevent it being used in a foreign influence operation. Yet, Mr. Trudeau, when he was here, said it was impossible for there to have been foreign influence operation carried out using the foundation. How is it possible that he's correct?
Well, I can't speak for him, but my own view is that there has never been an opportunity for a so-called foreign influence operation to
I think we've just discussed the evidence of it, sir.
Influence the foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Barrett, we're going to go to... Okay, Mr. Cooper, go ahead, sir. You've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, for appearing. So just so that I'm fully clear, there's been no progress made, no law firm, no accounting firm, nothing has happened with respect to undertaking a review.
I can't speak to that because I haven't been involved.
Okay. On March 1st, a check was written to return the donation. That was a day following the report in the Globe and Mail. Who was that check made out to?
I don't recall. I don't know. I wasn't involved in with that check. That would have been a function of management.
You have no idea who the check was made out to?
I'm told it was the donor, and I have no reason to question that.
Well, Mr. Johnson, through you, Mr. Chair, you said on April 12, 2023 in the National Post that the $140,000 had, quote, been refunded to the same person who was on the check and the same person who issued receipts from the Canada Revenue Agency for the donation, end of quote. So those are your words. So surely you must be able to state who that person or entity is.
I wasn't interviewed by I didn't talk to the National Post. I don't know where that comes from.
Well, that is what the National Post attributed to you on April 12, 2023. And further to that, Ms. Fournier stated in her testimony that you were involved in crafting the March 1st, 2023 statement from her indicating that the foundation had refunded the money to the donor. Were you involved in crafting that statement?
Yes, I was.
And you're telling me that you otherwise have no idea, even though you apparently said that the funds were returned to the donor.
Correct, because I had assurances from Dr. Fournier that that was the case.
Ms. Fournier, or Dr. Fournier, indicated that upon the check being sent, that it came back to the foundation, and as of March of 23rd, it had come back for a final time before a decision was made not to sit on it and to essentially freeze those funds. So has that check since been returned? Has it been cashed?
The funds have been returned to the donor.
The funds have been returned to the donor?
Yes.
And who is the donor?
I can't tell you. I can't tell you the name. That's the.
Mr. Johnson, you're the chair
Right.
of the Trudeau Foundation, aren't you?
I am.
And how is it possible that you can't confirm who is the recipient of $140,000 from your foundation? How is that possible?
I wasn't involved in the repayment.
But you just,
I was not involved in the repayment.
sir, you stated just a few seconds ago that it has been returned to the donor.
Correct.
So who is it?
I can't tell you.
You can't tell.
No, I wasn't. As I say, I was not involved.
$140,000, and you haven't, and it's been now a month and a half, 2 months, and you haven't bothered to inquire where $140,000 in the middle of a national scandal went?
I was satisfied that it had gone to the donor.
How could you be possibly satisfied that it went to the donor? How? You just, who did you talk to?
Talked to our council and to people in the foundation involved in repaying the donation to the donor.
And is that donor in Canada? Is that donor in Beijing? Is it the China Cultural Industry Association? Is it the Millennium Golden Eagle International Canada Inc.? You used some very specific language in your opening statement in which you referred to a donation coming from a Chinese-Canadian entity.
Right.
What are you referring to there?
I'm basing that on the testimony of Mr. Rosenberg and on the information that's come to me through our council and through my colleagues on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Cooper. Monsieur Berthold, vous avez 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you. You said that the foundation was never influenced by the Chinese regime, correct? Do you believe that the donation of $180,000 that was refunded to the donors, according to CSIS, is this an attempt at interference by Beijing?
Alleged, or the allegations as alleged, were correct, then there would be an arguable case that it was an attempt at influence, if they are correct.
Mais vous avez jamais questionné les
But you never question the facts.
Les questions.
We cannot question them. It's an article that quotes a conversation at CSIS with a wiretap. We saw that a diplomat was expelled from Canada. Mr. Rosenberg stated that he might have been naive with foreign interference and the donation, and Alexandre Trudeau stated that there was no reason to think that there was an attempt at foreign interference. Would you agree? With who would you agree more? I would say neither. To my knowledge, I didn't see any influence on the foundation. So you're saying there was no influence on the foundation. Do you understand that the Beijing regime would have no reason to influence the organization, but rather the Trudeau government? I can't comment on that. But honestly, to say that Beijing didn't have an influence on the foundation, I understand they were not the target. Can you admit, Mr. Johnson, that the Trudeau Foundation that shares the name of a former prime minister and one son is an active member and the other son is Prime Minister of Canada? So it could seem for a foreign country to be an interesting target for someone seeking to assert influence.
Can't comment on that. I don't.
Vous avez travaillé pour.
You worked for a few Liberal ministers during your career, correct? So you'll always support the Trudeaus in your answers because Up till now, you asked to come here. You arrived underprepared. You can't tell us anything regarding the checks or the receipts. Mr. Johnson, it's clear that you're protecting someone or something, but it's unacceptable that you didn't come better prepared to come here. You knew the types of questions we were going to ask, that we were going to question you on receipts and on the check. And you didn't take the time to ask anyone at the foundation as president of the foundation in order to get these answers. Why didn't you want to know? I was satisfied. Is it because you didn't want to have to answer the questions to committee members? Mr. Berthold, please take a... one moment, please. There's a call to order.
We'll allow the witness to be, he's not even a witness, not a court of law, but to our guests here to be able to answer
Yes, he's a
perhaps a
witness.
number of questions, because there were a number of questions that were asked. I think he should be given an opportunity to do so. He was trying to do so in his second language. I don't know if there's a possibility for him thank to you.
Ah.
answer the question before a new series of questions are asked.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Monsieur Berthold, j'ai arrêté.
Monsieur Berthold, I stopped your time. If you ask a question, you need to wait for the witness to answer. Please go ahead. Mr. Johnson, do you admit with your political experience you worked for political cabinets, you were a mentor during political campaigns, according to other witnesses? You said that nobody wants to influence the foundation, but it's rather Trudeau, the politician who is now Prime Minister, who was the target of Beijing, according to the CSIS report. With all of your experience, can you at least admit that the foundation could have been a target for a foreign entity seeking to influence the Trudeau family and the Liberal government?
No evidence that would support that. And I am, based on the evidence that's in the public domain, I'm very skeptical of that being the motive behind this donation. It should be borne in mind the same donor made a donation to the University of Toronto a year or two earlier of $800,000 to honor Norman Bethune, a Canadian with a role in China. He comes back to the Université de Montréal with another $1 million, honoring another Canadian who was instrumental in developing
Moi,
relations
vous
with
connaissez
China.
certains détails quand même, Monsieur.
You should know certain details. Thank you.
And that'll take us to the end. Go ahead, Mr. Brock, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your attendance, Mr. Johnson. I understand that you have you bring to your testimony today a significant history in the political field, the legal field, and the governance field, as well as a significant period of time on the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. I'm actually shocked, unbelievably shocked, that you came before this committee. You've indicated in previous statements that you wanted an opportunity to correct some of the factual discrepancies in Ms. Fournier's statement. You wanted an opportunity to rebut many of those statements. I'm really gobsmacked, sir, that you were unable to answer basic questions with respect to the refund of this donation. You are the chairman of this particular organization managing $125 million in taxpayer-funded money. You had to have known that one of the questions put to you, sir, would have been in relation to the donation and the refund. So I want to just go at those questions and that line a little bit more into detail. You are unable to tell me, because you were not responsible for issuing the check to return to a particular donor of the $140 million. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But you will undertake to tell this committee who, in fact, did at the foundation. Is that correct? You will
yes.
undertake to do that?
I can undertake to do exactly that.
Okay, and you will further undertake to tell us who exactly the refund was issued to. Okay? And you will also tell us, sir, how that donation was transferred to the donor, whether by electronic transfer, whether by issuing a check from the foundation, or in some other capacity. All understood?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about the actual receipts that were given by the foundation itself when the money actually came in. You must be aware, sir, that there was an issue amongst the members as well as board members with respect to the discrepancies as it relates to those receipts. You agree?
I'm not sure that there was an issue. There was a concern raised by Dr. Fournier about whether or not the receipts had been properly issued. And subsequently, we heard the testimony of Mr. Rosenberg, who was involved very much at the time.
Sure. I'll cut to the chase. Two receipts were prepared by the foundation. The first installment of $70,000 in 2017, the second installment in 2018 for $70,000, presumably coming from the same donor, the same source, yet two receipts from the Pierre, Elliott, Trudeau Foundation, completely different. One was sent to a corporation with an address in Hong Kong that subsequently was directed by the Chinese government to resend that to Beijing, and the second receipt sent to a shell corporation, the Millennium Group, in Dorval, Quebec. You must be aware of that, sir, as the chairman of the board.
My understanding, from what I've heard in the testimony, previous testimony, and what I'm informed, is that both receipts went to the donor.
Well, you don't know that, do you, sir? You're
No.
basing it. So I'm asking again, what preparations, sir, did you do to prepare for your testimony today?
I discussed a broad range of things. I reviewed a broad range of things, but I'm chair of the board, and my involvement in day-to-day detail is quite minimal.
Okay, but sir, you're the chairman of the board. You came here because you wanted to clear the air and correct the factual inaccuracies from Dr. Fournier. This is your opportunity, and I'm sorry, sir, you don't have the opportunity to say, I don't know, I didn't look into it. You're relying upon previous testimony, sir. That does not give you a pass. That is not proper governance.
Mr. Brock?
So I really question,
Minutes is
sir,
up.
what governance
Thank you.
policies you had in
Mr. Brock?
place.